We are here with Barista Bob with Barista Bob's Coffee Shop in Mooresville. He's going to give us a little education on coffee, coffee growing, variety of coffee, and maybe some coffee facts we are not aware of.
Welcome to the show, Bob.
Good morning.
Before we get into learning about coffee, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the shop, about Barista Bob's.
Well, we actually came back from a trip from Africa and decided that what we saw in Africa, we would lose everything, so we'd take the risk and we could still be as happy as people who had actually had nothing and they were very happy. So we took the risk. I've been in the coffee business for 10 years. My wife and I have both been in the restaurant industry since we were in our mid-teens.
Wow.
So this was an opportunity to do something out on our own, learn a little bit about running our own business for an ultimate goal of moving west and opening a bed and breakfast and coffee shop.
Wow. And do you have like a particular philosophy about coffee and the atmosphere that you want to
I think coffee should be fun. And our whole point of opening Barista Bob's was not to be on the high end of the coffee house road or the low end. It was to be right in the middle, to make very high quality drinks without the high cost.
Right.
And that's what we really strive to do.
Or without the pretension that you
Yes,
sometimes
absolutely.
get. If you're
Make it
not a big
simple.
coffee drinker, sometimes it's intimidating to go into a coffee shop. You don't know the lingo.
Well, coffee's changed so much over the years. I think back to when I was a teenager, and you know, it was basically Dunkin' Donuts or your diner coffee shop coffee, and it's now you can. How many different varieties of coffee are there?
There's always been a variety of coffee. I mean, it was found over in Ethiopia many years ago. But what had happened during the 70s was coffee prices skyrocketed in the American market. Really, they cheapened what they put into the coffee you got in the grocery store, and it really made a terrible cup of coffee. And thanks for Howard Schultz of Starbucks, who really has got the road moving with specialty coffee about 12-15 years ago, and it's really opened up just a world of knowledge to the American consumer.
Now, I'm not a big coffee drinker. I don't know that much about coffee, although my grandparents did live in Costa Rica for a while when I was younger, and that's a big coffee place. I know people always rave about Costa Rican coffee beans. Now, you grow coffee beans, and can you explain a little bit about how beans grow and how they're processed into coffee? And
I will. Just to clarify, though, we don't roast the coffee that we serve in our shop. We actually have a commercial roaster in the Carolinas that does that for us. But it's been a passion of mine for many years, and I'll explain why. Really, the way it starts out is you have a coffee cherry, which I have some dried cherries in here. And this is actually, it looks like when it's on the tree, it actually is bright red. It looks just like a cherry on a cherry tree. And that's what you plant in the soil. So about 7 or 8 years ago, we had got some little seedlings. They were about 3 inches high. They grew into something about this high within about 6 months to a year.
Wow, that's a long time to make it that small of a plant.
And this is 7 to 8 years later.
Wow.
We have one in the shop that's 6 foot tall, and that one actually bloomed last year, produced fruit, and that's where these coffee cherries came from, along with what you see in front of us. Because what happens, if I talk about the processing coffee, you have the cherries, you pick them, and they're still picked by hand. Many people don't realize coffee is a very labor-intensive industry. Millions of people pick coffee for a living. That's all they do. They pick the cherries. They dry them out. When they dry them out on the patios, it comes up to something like this, which you said earlier looks just like peanuts, and that's what it is. But if you take one of these and you pull the shell, and this is called the parchment. This is how they're stored before they come or exported over out of the country into the United States. And it's really just a covering to protect what we call a green coffee bean, which we have here.
Okay.
So this is what they put in these big burlap bags.
So that's basically a raw coffee bean.
Yes, it's a raw coffee bean. They call it a green bean.
So it's coming in the shell, so
well, actually, no. They take it out of the shell before they export it. They store it that way in country until it's ready to be shipped.
Okay.
Then they put the raw beans into these burlap bags like this. So you can imagine how many beans like this it takes to fill up one of these bags.
Yeah.
And there's 2 different main coffees in the world. You have, this is Cafe Robusta. Okay? This is a lower end. This is farmed more mechanically. They can actually do this by machine.
So it makes it lower end because it's the way it's harvested?
It's where it's grown. Coffee is grown in high altitudes. The higher the altitude, the longer it takes to grow, the more it matures, the bigger the raw beans get. And this is Cafe Arabica. This is the best coffee in the world. So that maturity, and these are all hand-picked still.
Now,
because
can
these are
that
the best ones.
type of coffee bean grow in different locations? Like, can you get that type of bean grown in Guatemala and Costa Rica and Kenya, or is
all the
it,
places you named, it can be grown.
Okay.
But it must be generally between 20 degrees north or south of the equator.
Okay.
And a high altitude, generally 4,000 to 6,000 feet, are where you get the best coffee beans in the world. They do grow at sea level up to 4,000 feet, but generally you're talking about the lower end beans. They don't mature. And sometimes you can get 2 crops out of a tree a year on Robusta, only 1 per year on an Arabica. And a regular coffee tree on a plantation would only produce 1 to 2 pounds of roasted coffee per year.
And and it takes a long time for a tree to grow too. So how long does it take before it can even produce fruit?
It takes 5 to 7 years. Ours took 7 years to produce, and that was controlled environment inside. It was actually risky bringing this outside today to bring it here because frost will immediately immediately kill the plant.
Wow.
So I had 5 and I only have 4, so I know that from firsthand experience. What happens after this gets into the United States is the beans are put into a big roaster. And these roasters are a lot like big commercial washing machines. It's just a big tumbler, usually gas-fired. And the degree of darkness is really determined by how long it's in there. But a matter of 30 seconds to a minute can make all the difference in a coffee profile. 30 seconds longer can make it very smoky, very, very dark, as opposed to a medium dark, which will generally be a little brighter, sit on your tongue.
So is this where you get the espresso roast versus the dark roast?
Yes, espresso roast, believe it or not, some people think espresso is the darkest coffee, but it isn't. Actually, Italian roast is your darkest, French roast is slightly under that, and that's mainly, this is close to a French roast. An espresso roast is just slightly lighter than that. And that allows the acidities to come out of the coffees, the flavor profiles. Coffee, and it's really funny you're doing this at the wine loft, but coffee actually is described much like wine. The nuttiness, the fruitiness, chocolate undertones, things like that. And a lot of those can be brought out during the roasting process. A very, very light coffee, a very, very dark coffee of the same bean will taste entirely different. You won't even be able to tell they're the same coffee.
So there's a lot of variables. And so for the base plant, though, you're saying the plants are pretty much the same, and where you're getting the different quality is the growing location.
Generally speaking, all the coffee plants in the world are generally the Arabica coffee beans or the Robusta, but it's where they're grown that determines, much like wine, the soil. A coffee from Hawaii, grown in that volcanic soil, is very, very, very smooth, and the sun and the rain really make that coffee different. But if you get down into South and Central America, you get a very bright, crisp coffee, generally speaking, from those areas. And then you get over to Africa, you generally get a muddy or earthy coffee. Africa, Indonesia, both of those have those type of qualities. And what's really nice is most espressos are a blend of those to bring out different, whatever the roaster wants to bring out in their espresso roast. So they'll mix and match beans so they can come up with an ultimate blend for espresso.
Wow, well, there's so
Like
much
wine.
good information, and we got to go to a break right now, but we'll come back so that we can
Finish up our
conversation.
Thank you.